You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Cool. Okay.
Good luck. Good luck.
Good luck to you too. Yeah. Before we carry on my chat with Omar, I want to do a little intro, if that's okay. You can't respond, so I'm going to do it anyway. Along the Lines is an ongoing experiment in providing an enjoyable and hopefully meaningful podcast. I love talking to interesting people, but my ultimate aim is for it to benefit all of you listeners in some way. While we're in this coronavirus lockdown, I obviously won't be able to meet my guests in person, so the conversations will take place along the phone lines. Each episode will be along the lines of whatever subjects are interesting and relevant to each guest that I chat to. And I want to create a wide variety of these episodes so that you all have the different subjects and styles of conversation to choose from. This first episode kicks us off into the podcast with someone that I think provides a lot of goodness to everyone that encounters him. We cover a few subjects, like the love of languages, having Syrian parents, feeling a sense of belonging to more than one culture, and exploring the art of counselling. Stick around if any of them sound interesting to you. Well, let's go for it, shall we? Here's the first episode of Along the Lines. Welcome to the show with me, Dan, and my guest, Omar Malas. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks. How you feeling about? Is this your first time ever doing an interview of any kind, or a recorded chat?
Definitely, yeah. First time doing a recorded chat, so I'm not really sure what to expect, but I'm excited actually.
Well, we'll just see what happens. That's it. I've never done anything quite like this. I've recorded stuff like on video, but I've never done just purely sound recording.
Okay.
So yeah, it's new in a way for both of us. I'm feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness.
Okay.
But I'm talking to you, so that makes me feel at ease.
Okay, good. we can use that. So.
Sweet. Well, if we could start, if we could just chat a little bit about what your life was like, an overview of what your life was like before sort of COVID came along and changed some things.
Okay. That kind of seems like quite a while ago. It seems like this it seems like almost like a new normal, this lockdown business. But my life before, okay, so I'm in my last year of training, of my counselling training, which takes up a significant chunk of my life. So I was due to finish this June in my level 4 diploma in counselling, after which I would become qualified. And I'm also in placement at the minute with an counselling agency, in a drug and alcohol addiction agency. And so I've been, which is still going on.
So that's you've chosen to do the drug and alcohol counselling, or is that part of it anyway?
Well, actually, that's just, I mean, we needed hours in our placement to be able to pass the course.
Yeah.
And I guess I looked around for different agencies, and this was the one that was offered to me.
Okay.
So I didn't specifically want to work in drug and alcohol addiction, but it's still a good opportunity.
Okay.
And I can still apply my training to almost, to any form of help, whether it's drug and alcohol or bereavement or grief or whatever else. So there's just one application of it. So that's the counselling side of things, and otherwise, well, you asked for my life what my
Your life story.
everything.
Your life story in one word. No, yeah. Just
How long have we
so.
got?
Yeah, exactly. So just generally, sort of what your life. So you got the counts. You were studying to be a counsellor.
Yeah.
And any other sort of significant areas of your life, I guess. The main ones, I guess.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, there isn't. I mean, I've got, like I said, interests in things. Like, I was doing some jiu-jitsu before this lockdown happened. I started doing a bit of that.
And you don't want to get that mixed up with the counselling, do you?
Yeah, I mean, that's like that's like the last solution. You know, like if talking doesn't work, we just wrestle. So
okay. So is that funded by your course then? They just say you've got to do jiu-jitsu as well.
I just ask my clients to come in comfortable clothing, in least comfortable clothing,
and a bit of extra padding.
Yeah, and if they can beat me, then they get 10% discount.
Oh,
so.
nice, good deal.
Yeah. No, but it's actually been a good outlet for me in terms of it's kind of like a martial art where you can kind of think creatively and also kind of apply just like the smallest changes to your practice that can really make a big difference, and it kind of in a way I know in a way it kind of shows that the small details to anything really do matter. So in some ways it does have a link, but not as big of a link as you might have hoped for.
Okay, cool. And I mean, with the council, unless there's anything else you wanted to chat about or mention before this.
Not specifically. I mean, I'm happy to talk about the counselling work and.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what made you decide to do a course? So is it a 3-year course in total?
Yeah, it was 3 years, but I did 1 year back in my hometown in Manchester.
Okay.
And then I took a break for a year. I was living in Spain for a while. Then I came back, moved to Bristol, and then then this is the last year of a 2-year course. So 3 years in total, yeah.
Cool. Okay. So counselling's quite a. I mean, me knowing you, I understand sort of the basics of why you went for it. But I know there's a whole load of people who could think of something that, you know, any sort of social work or sort of that sort of stuff is really difficult for some people, and they would hate the idea of doing something like that. But I know that they're like I love sort of human to human stuff as well, and yeah. So, but for you personally, what led you to decide that you wanted to study it?
I guess in the years between graduating university, that must have been about 7 years ago. And I graduated in business management, and it wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. But I finished my degree, and then I was kind of did a lot of typical post-uni things like travel and finding myself, and just a bunch of cliches really. I kind of I hopped around between different things just to try and, because I wasn't really sure what it is I wanted to do, and I guess over time, doing different jobs like in teaching and chefing, and I kind of almost went through a bit of a process of elimination where I started to realize that where kind of some of my strengths were and where my weaknesses were, and I think I started to realize that I could kind of really sit with someone and listen to them, and not just listen just passively, but also listening in a way where they really felt heard, like almost like they felt I wasn't just waiting for them to finish to respond. I really wanted to hear whatever they had to say, whether they were going through some difficulties or whether they were just they had something to share. And I think that's also something that, you know, I did a lot of traveling in my mid-20s, and even that, just kind of meeting people and talking to people and learning languages to be able to talk to people. I also learned a bit about what it felt like to not be understood or to be understood, and that kind of gave me like an added perspective into maybe working with people who wanted to feel heard or wanted to feel like they were understood when maybe other people in their life didn't really quite get them.
So do you think that was one of the highlights of the traveling you've done? Because I feel like traveling is something that there's lots of people who want to do it, but there's different reasons for wanting to do it, or different things that different factors that people enjoy about it. Do you think the sort of the meeting people side of it, or listening to people and finding out about people was one of the main factors for you that you enjoyed and drew you towards it?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that does appeal to me massively about traveling is a language. I've always liked learning languages. I've liked, even if it was like a difficult language, I even liked to learn as much as I could while I was in that country, for example. And because for me, that kind of having that extra medium or having that extra tool to be able to communicate with someone, to understand them, it almost like opened up the possibility of understanding an extra 50 million people, 100 million people, it opened up the possibility of being able to communicate with that many more people. And I think in the same way that language did that for me, almost like I wanted to maybe develop that same, I guess, attitude or skill, which is the skill of listening, the way you empathize with someone, the way you really you can really be so sensitive to what they're saying and what they're feeling, to be so I guess so sharp to be able to really pick up exactly what that person's trying to convey.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, I was going to say, so that's just in some ways that that traveling experience kind of led on to wanting to maybe professionally work with people and communicate with people and listen and hear people out for whatever story they had to bring.
Okay. Do you feel like that? Because I've been thinking about recently, sort of more things that are within us anyway, or things that we get along the way. Do you feel like, obviously it's difficult to say for sure, but do you feel like that sort of want to have that human interaction, and that obviously we all have that, but to the extent that you have it more than most others, wanting to have that real listening and connection, and the thirst for learning languages and things like that. Do you think that was almost like within you anyway, and the traveling brought it out, or do you think actually doing the traveling, then it just opened your eyes to this thing that you didn't really feel like was much within you before?
I think that actually traveling really did. I think it was there. I mean, I was always interested in kind of the world beyond my comfort zone. I was always interested in kind of just those kind of perspectives that were so different to mine, and that the diversity and difference that existed out there. And I wanted to, I guess I wanted to meet people who had such a different life to me. And I guess travel gave me the opportunity to, to encounter people that were so different to me. It wasn't always easy, because I think that sometimes when you travel, you can still come across people who are still quite similar to you, like other travelers and other European travelers, for example, who have that privilege to be able to move around and meet each other in hostels and stuff. But I kind of wanted to kind of go a bit off the beaten track, and for me to be able to do that and to meet people, I would have had to learn some of the local language to be able to kind of move away from that kind of that traveler's kind of backpackers world, and to kind of really get to know the people of that country, for example. And sometimes it happens, and sometimes it didn't, and depending on where I was. But I did feel like language was a pretty significant tool to be able to tap into, I guess, that resource of people who are so different to me.
And how many languages do you speak? Like how many could you get by with, do you think?
I'd say including English, 5. I mean, I grew up bilingual, so I grew up with Arabic and English.
Oh, okay.
I learned French in school. I learned Spanish on my travels, and then I speak some Italian as well.
Cool. Were you quite good at French in school?
It was definitely one of my favorite subjects, especially because most other kids in school didn't like French and didn't like languages. So it meant a smaller class and a bit more of the teacher's attention.
Yeah, and you could be more of a hipster, liking the stuff that everyone else hates.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I language was one of my least favorites. Probably because I was in a class with people that were so good at it. But now because I was lucky to learn Spanish at school, which is rare. I think it's usually French or German, isn't it?
Yeah.
But now I whenever I've been to a Spanish country, I really try and use it as much as I can, which is limited. But so how come you were bilingual and you knew Arabic when you were younger then?
Well, because so my parents are of Syrian ethnicity. So and my grandparents and my uncles and aunts also live here as well. So I kind of, in my household, and whenever we visited them, my grandparents, for example, like Arabic was the language of choice. And it was a lot more prominent as kids than now. I mean, like with my parents, I mean, we tend to speak English, but
right.
But I mean, I think they kind of made the effort to have us learn Arabic as kids, just to kind of instill that, just to instill enough of it so we could kind of get by on a pretty good level. And then and I am grateful to my parents and my family for that, because that kind of that ability to be able to switch from English to Arabic kind of really helped me to learn other languages. I think that ability really passed on to French and Spanish and so on. So I am grateful for that.
Yeah. I don't know much about languages, clearly, because Spanish was the lowest grade for me in GCSE, but I imagine Arabic is actually quite different to English, you know, if you compare it to English to Spanish and French. That I guess, do you think maybe having that basis of not just two different languages, but actually having two very different, is Arabic, do you read right to left in Arabic, or is that not?
It is right to left. You're right, absolutely right. It is very different to English, and the alphabet and even like a lot of letters and sounds are quite different. So it was challenging. I mean, there was always a kind of conversational Arabic in our household, but I remember when I was a kid, I was sent to a Saturday school, an Arabic Saturday school, and I used to hate it. I used to, because it was hard. I mean, I was still, because I wasn't completely immersed in Arabic, because I wasn't living in an Arabic country. It was still quite a challenge for me to have to learn to read and write, and I'm still, I'm okay, but I'm still a few levels lower than natives of an Arabic country. Sorry, carry on. I was going to say that it's still definitely enough for me to have a good conversation with in Arabic with someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are both your parents Syrian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you feel like they both probably taught you just as much together, in terms of there wasn't one sort of parent who was pushing the Arabic more, or?
Well, it was. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And I live with my mum, so it was more my mum, because I live with her. But
Okay.
my dad was just as capable to speak, and we still spoke a little bit, I guess, with him, but he wasn't around as much as obviously because we lived with my mum, so it was more like my mum and her side of the family with whom we spoke.
And have you ever been to Syria?
Yeah, I used to go quite a bit as a kid. The last time I went was it must have been about 10 years ago, I think, actually, or even 11 years ago. But I tended to go during the summers for about a month. So I've probably been about 8 or 9 times.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's like your predominant memories of it, in terms of, in terms of everything, but also in terms of the differences and the things that sort of jump out to you, of your memories?
I guess, I mean, over there, like the like family is everything. So there's a big emphasis on like whenever we used to go, we'd spend almost all our time visiting relatives, because that's what, because it's such a the culture is quite, it's quite a familial culture. I guess it's not as, like maybe here in the UK, there's a bit more of an individualistic perspective that's fostered, whereas over there it's kind of more, definitely more like groups and families, and like lots of gatherings, and almost always centered around food.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what stands out about the culture. But it was, it's also like it was one thing I always enjoyed about Syria was that the people are very proud of their culture. It's quite there's a rich history of Syria. It's some of the oldest civilizations were in that part of the world. So there's kind of the old town of Damascus where always had people used to like kind of go about their work and their day with with a strong sense of purpose and pride in what they were doing. So it was interesting seeing that. I mean, I guess I mean you see that in every country, but can't quite put my finger on how that was different to the British culture that I grew up with.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I can't quite put my finger on it, but I could definitely feel like even though I kind of had a sense of a Syrian culture here in England growing up, but I still felt like I was very much a guest or a visitor whenever I went over there.
Right.
I still sense that difference because it wasn't the culture I grew up in.
And I mean, it probably sounds like a stupid question, but is the main reason you haven't been back because of what's been going on there?
Yeah, I probably would have gone back sooner. If the Civil War hadn't started. I think I started about 3 years after I'd last been.
Right.
I do. I mean, like it was never my home because I'm born and bred in the UK, but there is something about it. It still holds a place in my life in terms of the meaning it has for me. And like I did have a lot of great memories with family and cousins and uncles and aunts there. So it is a shame, and furthermore, actually, because we used to always go and visit family, I didn't really feel like I saw much of the country. It was more like seeing the dining rooms of people's houses.
Yeah.
So I kind of it is a bit of a shame that I mean, I could go back. I think it's kind of quieting down a bit.
Yeah. Right.
Since then, but I think it'll still be a while before I can go back.
Mm. And do you find that there's parts of you that you could, obviously again it's something you can't say for sure, but do you feel like there's parts of you that you feel like is a more Syrian part, is comes from that? Obviously you've got the language, but do you ever recognize things in yourself that you feel it's not as English as other things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one because even though I kind of feel more British than Syrian, but I've always felt like I've floated in between. Like I felt like I've not fully belonged to either culture.
Okay.
I mean, like there's more chance that I will kind of connect with and get along with a Brit, mainly because of the language, because there's so much more I can play around with English because of all the different in terms of humor, for example. I can just get a lot more because English is my first language, and I still grew up here, so but at the same time there's I didn't like the food, for example, that we grew up with was more Syrian food, and I guess some elements of like pop culture maybe I didn't really have growing up, so or music culture, for example, because my parents came here as teenagers, so they themselves and their parents didn't quite have as strong of a I guess in terms of pop or music culture, there wasn't as strong of a there wasn't much passed down, I guess, to them. So I kind of picked up more of those things like later on in my adult life. For example, I'm from Manchester, but there's even like some like Manchester bands that I didn't even hear about until I was like in my 20s, and the people would be surprised to hear that. How can you not know like this group or this group, like this, for example, like Joy Division or the Smiths, for example, which I don't know hardly anything about, but even though they're a big essence of the place I grew up in. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So have you still got any family over there?
I mean, they're mainly like second cousins and great uncles and aunts. My closer family are spread between England and America mainly.
Okay.
But I'm not really in touch with them. It's more my grandparents and my parents who are more in touch with the family in Syria. So it does feel like that connection has definitely has weakened quite a bit since I mean because it's been a while since I've been there. Yeah.
And are they, as far as you know, are they doing okay?
I mean, as far as I know, because most of them are centered in Damascus, in the capital. So, and the troubles weren't as bad in the capital. So, as far as I know, most people, most of my family are okay, and yeah.
No, I sort of, I mean, I don't have sort of a situation where both my parents are English, but I can relate a lot of sort of what you were saying in the sort of, because Emma, my girlfriend, is half Finnish, and a lot of her sort of the way she talks about memories from when she was younger, and sort of seeing things in her or seeing things in herself that's she gets from her mum, so her mum's Finnish. But I mean, on top of that, having that sort of horrendous situation going on in a country that you have such a strong affiliation with, it's a very different thing, isn't it? I can't imagine that, because you've got that extra negative thing on top of it, really.
It's a weird one. I mean, the best way I can just describe it is, like, for me, is just feeling just, I mean, like, like feeling like I do belong to both, but I also don't belong to either.
Right. Yeah.
It's a weird one. I kind of being in between, but I mean, in some ways, that kind of gives me I've kind of grown up with the perspective from both sides, so there is definitely a benefit in that, because I can almost, there's enough for me to get on with people from both sides of the culture. So it kind of almost like just because I was born as a second generation migrant, so that almost gives me almost automatically gives me a whole nother viewpoint from which to look through, a whole nother lens through which I can kind of look at life through.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually amazing in terms of, what we see in terms of the divide, that you're, or not to make you out to be this sort of symbol of something, but you are someone who bridges that divide in a sense, just because it's such different. Obviously, we're all human and we're all connected by that, but because this culture is so different, because there's such a this horrible sort of divide between East and West, or the Middle East and the West, and it actually puts you in quite I don't want to say positive or negative, but just an amazing position, a very interesting position where you have, like, it's not even, you've got a Manchester accent as well, so it's it's not like you just dipped your toes in sort of because you grew up in England, you are English. It's it's really interesting that you're almost a link between these two sort of cultures, and I don't want to say sides, but that don't always see eye to eye, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I guess in some ways, like, when I was a kid, you kind of follow what your parents where your parents and your family, there was kind of a sense of, because of family, I mean, we weren't only Syrian, but we were also Muslim as well. So there was a bit of a bit more of an insular kind of way, like, we were kind of encouraged to mainly, to have other Muslim and Arab friends. We go to, I went to a Muslim primary school, and we were kind of, I think there was a bit of an us and them kind of mentality. Definitely, like, from my coming from my grandparents as well. I think it's kind of I think maybe as migrants, there's kind of a sense of maybe, like, protecting your identity. Like, it's almost like even more protected because you're in a different country. It almost needs to be protected even more. So the community is almost even stronger. So I had that growing up, but then when I moved out of childhood and got a bit older, I started to have more curiosity and intrigue into the other and them, and I kind of almost wanted to move away from that divide and take the positives from both sides, and in terms of the cultural positives, and but also not kind of be a part of that division, of that us and them mentality. And I kind of wanted to start to meet people, or get to know people, not just because they were either Muslim or non-Muslim or English or Syrian, but just because you're someone interesting and I want to get to know you, or you have a story that I've never heard of before, so I'm curious about whatever it is you've got to bring, regardless of your background,
Yeah. Do you feel like with obviously it's an absolute minority of people, and it's only the fringe of people that are creating sort of vicious divisions, but do you feel like actually your vantage point, if you could copy and paste that into someone for an hour to see, do you think, like, actually that point of view that you've had is it could really do a lot of good in terms of bridging those divides on either side.
Yeah, I think it could actually, because I think people assume that it's always kind of the majority who are ostracizing or who are looking down at the minority. But I think that from my experience, coming from a minority background, I've seen that it can also happen the other way, where the minority can kind of want to insulate themselves from the majority. So I think I think feeling what it's like to be a minority in a sense, but also like not quite a minority, because I'm still born here, so I kind of also like the way I speak, I don't sound like I'm from somewhere else. So I've kind of, it's almost like people, when they see me, they're not really sure where I'm from or if I'm English or not English, and it almost allows me to kind of float between the two sides. So it's almost like because of the way I am, I can't. It's almost I guess I'm kind of accepted by both sides, if there are ever two sides. But that kind of gives me the, I don't know. I think in some way this almost maybe shaped me to be a bit more maybe diplomatic in a sense, like, and maybe in a sense that's even led to my choice of being in counselling, because I kind of I've been on both sides, and I've been with both kinds of people, and I've been with more than one side of people, so I kind of get, I can kind of get the feelings of people on both sides, I guess, and it's almost left me in the middle without taking one side or the other. Kind of left me in the middle where I'm, where both sides, both points of view are valid. No.
Yeah, and from knowing you, you're definitely diplomatic is definitely one of your skills. Have you ever experienced any animosity on either side because you associate in some ways with being English and but also having English, and then also having Syrian heritage and Muslim background as well?
Nothing directly, really.
Okay.
I know that my grandparents, for example, they do have some trepidation about people, I guess. I guess they kind of have a worry that our cultural values will be, I don't know what's the right word. That our cultural values will be
diluted,
impacted in a negative way by our I guess our host nation, in a way. Almost like if we stray too far from our Arabic Muslim culture, then it's a bad thing. So that's the only kind of, I guess, that's kind of, I guess, fear that might have been fostered in us as kids a little bit from my grandparents and maybe our uncles and aunts. But I soon learned that wasn't the case. That fear didn't have any reasonable backing to it. So I kind of wanted to find out for myself what the real truth is in other people, rather than just assuming that everyone who wasn't what I was is bad. Yeah. Or is, yeah.
And to be honest, even though it's different, your situation, I think a lot of people can probably relate to their grandparents worrying about, values getting lost and the new generation going off too far. And I think, so there's an aspect to that, I can definitely relate to that. My, one of my grandparents is Christian. Well, they both are, but my nan is very Christian. She regularly tells us how we think we're straying from Christian values, or well, not regularly, but it's I think it's almost like a role. If you're going to be a grandparent, you have to fill out a form and say you're going to be disapproving of the younger generation in some way or another. But yeah. So I can relate to that, and definitely.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when I was a teenager, and when I started to kind of explore new things, and like, you know, when I started like trying new things, like I tried alcohol, and I hung around with new people, and I was doing things that were kind of looked at, you know, that were kind of really wrong and forbidden in the culture and the religion I kind of grew up in, and I kind of always used to hide that side to me. But then as I got into my 20s, I was less apologetic for who I was, and for the fact that for the fact that I was exploring and trying new things, and that I wasn't kind of following the same like kind of path that my grandparents might have hoped for me. For example, like I guess my grandparents might have hoped that after I finished my business degree, I would go into something related to business, whatever the hell that is, because it's such a big term. But I kind of decided to just go off on my own and try different things, and I wasn't kind of apologetic for it. I wouldn't kind of hide the fact that I was trying this job or that job, or that maybe maybe even like just occasionally I would even bring into conversation that maybe, you know, I would even like challenge the status quo a little bit. Although I kind of learned quickly that I had to kind of pick my battles, because sometimes I kind of like learned to kind of rein in a little bit, because sometimes it's not always just to always kind of defy or just to go against what my grandparents' beliefs were. Like, I think in some ways I was kind of maybe almost a bit angry that I wasn't allowed to even look at the other perspective, and I kind of so I kind of always spoke my opinion. But then as I got a bit older and a bit more diplomatic, I kind of chose my battles and learned to kind of offer my way of living in a way that was still respectful of my grandparents, but in a way that still didn't kind of deny me who I was. It's almost like I didn't have to kind of hide an aspect of myself, but at the same time I didn't have to kind of just please my grandparents by saying that I was this or I was that. So I guess in some ways that kind of also is aligned with my counselling work. It's all about kind of being your authentic self and not doing things to please people, and because when you kind of speak from that place of truth, then I think that people can't hold that against you. And even with my grandparents, who kind of have a pretty rigid way of thinking, they can kind of see that I'm being a kind of a more authentic version of myself. So so even I think they kind of started to respect the fact that I'm being more open and unapologetic for the path that I might choose to go down. Yeah,
I can see how that would definitely have a really good positive effect on your counselling. In terms of the counselling, has there been any like surprises? I mean, I'm sure there's been lots of surprises, but like, has there been any sort of shifts in thoughts that stand out in terms of what you've learned, or the experiences you like, whether you learned it in the theory side of it or whether you learned it in practice, that sort of maybe there was a way you were doing things before, or maybe there was a belief you had about counselling that sort of shifted and you've found your view has been changed?
I can definitely say that the past 2 years have been some of the most transformative years in terms of learning about myself and how I relate to others. Because I mean, essentially, that's what counselling is. Counselling is it's a relationship that you have with someone that you explore, that whole relationship kind of it almost highlights the way that you relate to others as well. So so I've definitely learned a lot about how I relate to others in terms of I guess where I'm comfortable going, or where I'm uncomfortable or what I'm comfortable with exploring or not exploring. Or I've learned how one thing I've learned about myself is that I can often find it more challenging speaking out in a group. I kind of favor the more the one-to-one interaction with people, whereas I kind of find it more challenging in groups to kind of speak my voice and to kind of be heard. So kind of learning to kind of communicate more directly and to express myself has definitely been really like a steep learning curve in my counselling journey. Yeah.
So you feel like before maybe you were less willing to open up about your own feelings? Yeah,
massively. I mean, like the counselling journey itself, it also requires you to undergo your own counselling. And I have been in counselling on and off for the past 3 or 4 years. And in some ways, that kind of just being a client, that was further inspiration to be a counsellor as well, because I benefited so much from having someone who kind of offered that unconditional acceptance and non-judgment and that empathy and almost like gave me the space to just be me while I explored these things. So I kind of wanted to offer that to others. And I guess so when I talk about my counselling journey, it does include me in counselling as well as me in counselling training, because it all comes together because it's all about kind of learning about how I relate to others and getting insight into myself,
right?
Whether I've been on the side of counsellor or on the side of client, it's all kind of contributed to that.
Right. So it's almost like they feed into each other. Like the better you get at counselling others, that influences how well you're able to, I guess, be counselled or to work on yourself and your own sort of self-discovery. And then obviously that feeds back into the more you learn about yourself, the better your counselling is going to be. Is that what you're sort of saying? They sort of feed each other?
I'd say that, I think that the way, I guess in my experience, I mean, it's because I've got about 30 hours of experience with clients, compared to a lot more, compared to like 3 or 4 years of my own counselling as a client myself. So it's hard to kind of compare them because I've spent a lot more time on the side of client than counsellor.
Yeah.
But I can definitely say that the more I've opened up to myself to kind of explore, I guess, my feelings and to feel and to almost, I guess, learning to accept myself more as a client, and the more accepted I felt, it's almost that's kind of transferred onto my client work. I felt it a lot easier to offer that unconditional acceptance to my clients as well. Because some of my clients have come from all kinds of difficult backgrounds, and I mean, my clients have been involved in drugs in some way or another, and drug addiction. So I guess and some of the things they've brought have sometimes been a bit of a challenge, but kind of because I've been in that vulnerable position before, where I knew that where I was afraid of what my counsellor or what others might think of me for sharing something. I can relate to how my clients might have felt to come to someone, to a stranger, and just to really pour their hearts out and talk about something that is that might carry a lot of shame or that might be judged by other people in society, especially when it comes to drugs as well, or addiction. That's quite a big one in terms of shame and
stigma.
Yeah, definitely. So So it's almost like being in that position myself where I might have felt a bit of shame or judgment for whatever, then I can almost see what it would be like for them to open up to me.
Yeah. So I know it sometimes gets confused, and I know that I think I've got an idea, but I'm not 100% sure. So how would you define the difference between therapy and counselling, or is it different? Is one under the umbrella of other? Or like how? Like why would someone see a counsellor, or why would someone see, you know, like there's cognitive behavioural therapy and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, counselling and psychotherapy, as far as I know, and I've looked into that, they are interchangeable terms.
Okay.
I guess I'm not sure why there are two terms. Some people tend to assume that maybe counselling is more short term and therapy is longer term. Or sometimes people might take a counselling course, someone might take specifically a psychotherapy course, but they are essentially a form of talking therapy.
Okay.
So they are pretty much the same thing. Although there are different kind of modalities of counselling. So like you mentioned, like cognitive behavior therapy, which is quite a common one, especially under the NHS.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a theoretical approach that you would bring when you're in that counselling room with someone. Whereas the kind of counselling I've learned, or I'm currently training in, is person-centered counselling, which is it's a different approach.
And what is that approach?
Person-centered counselling is centered very much on. So I guess more like former types of or older approaches of counselling, like psychodynamic, for example. Have you heard of Sigmund Freud?
Yeah.
Yeah. So his kind of psychodynamic counselling, just to give you a bit of a contrast, was very much based on the notion of the therapist being kind of the expert on and the kind of being the expert, kind of giving the client the kind of the insight into themselves. So
right.
Almost like like telling the client, because of all these years of training I've had, I can kind of read you better than you can read yourself.
Right.
Whereas
like teacher-student type situation.
Yeah, very much so.
Right.
Whereas person-centered counselling is kind of is very much based on the fact that if I offer you the space and this unconditional acceptance and this empathy, and if I'm my authentic, genuine self, then if I offer you these conditions, then I trust that you will kind of reach that potential that you have. Like it's kind of based on, instead of the therapist leading the way to tell the client, okay, we're gonna talk about your mother today, or we're gonna talk about this today. It's kind of trusting that the client will go where they need to go. So you kind of follow the client's lead, and you kind of trust that they're the expert in themselves, but maybe they just don't know it yet. You're kind of there to almost empower them to foster some kind of self-awareness in themselves. You're kind of there with them, kind of like you kind of holding their hand along the way rather than leading them.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That's a nice analogy. Okay. Do you ever find it difficult? Because I feel like, one of my flaws, I know for sure, is that I give advice when it's not asked for. And I, especially with people closer to me, I feel like people who I don't know that well, or I haven't seen as much, I'm more willing to listen more and just ask questions. But I know it doesn't seem like that in this podcast, because I'm taking more of a listening role. But yeah, I know one of my flaws is that I want to give advice. Do you find it difficult sometimes when so it's more of a person-centered approach? Is that the right term?
Yeah, person-centered approach.
And they're trying to figure out stuff for themselves. Do you ever feel like you really want to say, whether it's right or wrong for the situation? Do you ever feel like you really want to tell them what to do? I know it sounds bad, but that sort of human thing of just like, do you ever feel that?
Yeah, I guess it does. It doesn't feel as strong as it used to when I first started my training.
Right.
Because that was very much the temptation is to, because I think in our, because I mean, I think you said it, like in our everyday lives, normally when someone comes to you with a problem, it's quite an automatic thing to just give them a solution to their problem, just to almost solve the problem for them.
Yeah, and
by telling them what they should do. Yeah, and I think sometimes people can get a bit pissed off by that, because it's almost, or at least in my experience, whenever sometimes I might come to someone with a problem, and I don't really necessarily need, or I might know what the solution is, but I just don't understand kind of why I'm behaving a certain way, or I kind of feel quite isolated in the feeling. So I think with counselling practice, and I've definitely learned, over the past few years, that there's almost, it can be quite powerful to be with someone in their feeling and to help them not feel so alone. And very often I found that a person can find their own solutions to their problems, if they just feel like they're not alone in the feeling. Whereas sometimes if I like earlier on in my training, when we used to do skills practice, and I would give more advice, I found that my client would kind of, when we finished our session, they would feel like I'd not really heard how they're feeling. I'd not kind of sensed how difficult or how heavy the feeling is. But I've kind of just focused on finding a way to solve it for them, which in some ways I kind of feel can be a bit disempowering. Whereas if I just trust that they will find the solution, then they will get there in the end. They just need someone to feel how shit things might feel like at this particular moment.
Yeah. So
can I say shit? Sorry.
You already said it now, mate.
Yeah, twice.
Well, you said it twice, actually.
just part of me being genuine, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so, I mean, I feel like, I may be wrong, but I feel like there is still very much types of therapy out there, or types of counselling out there that is more teacher-student approach, or there's more, I don't know if it's psychiatry, or I know there's a lot of different names for it.
There's a lot of jargon, yeah.
Yeah. Does that still exist, or is the not industry, what is the
field?
The field, fantastic. Yes, the field. Industry, that was more back to your business studies days. The industry of counselling. Yeah. So, is the field in general finding out that it's better, a more effective approach to give people the space, or is there still a subfield or a type of counselling or therapy that is or needs to be more direct with people, or needs to be more of a not telling them what to do, but you know what I mean? Does that still exist, or how's that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. I mean, there are so many kind of variations, and I think like your kind of confusion as to all these different terms. I think that's. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that you're not sure what's out there, because there is so much out there, and I guess different people, because of the diversity that exists within people, some people at different times of their life might feel like a more directive approach is where they kind of want more of an expert approach to really dig into their unconscious childhood behaviors, where some people might actually just want someone to might want to work with a therapist on an equal level playing field, where they don't feel like the therapist is the expert. So and actually there are even many kind of integrative approaches in counselling as well, where where people aren't just so purist and just sticking to one, but they're taking things from from different fields of counselling and kind of blending them together to to suit, to almost to reflect how that particular counselor or how that therapist might want to work with their clients. For example, like a person-centered counselling, some of the main conditions of it is offering that empathy and unconditional acceptance of the person. And since that's kind of come into existence, many other fields have kind of integrated that kind of essential condition of no matter what practice, no matter how they're working with their clients, they're not judging them, and they're completely accepting them, and they're really trying to step into the shoes of the client in an empathic way, even while they may be doing a more directive or a more psychodynamic approach or whatever. They're still kind of bringing in elements of person-centered counselling into their practice, and vice versa as well.
So I guess it's like the art of counselling. There's an art to it. It's when you bring in these more direct approach, or when you step back and let them have the space. Does that sound sort of like what it can be like? Is that you sort of change?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I mean there are people who might be practicing, even if they're practicing like a more directive approach of being more of an expert. Somebody can still be very good at what they do and can still really help a client, and there might be clients who might need that approach at a particular time in their life.
Sure.
So there's no right approach at all.
No.
I guess with the different counsellors that I've worked with, or tutors or other people that I've met in this field, I find that it's hard to put it into categories of like best or worst or good or bad, but I find that the most effective counsellors are ones where I really feel like they're really genuine, and they're really authentic, and almost like their genuineness almost conveys the message that it's okay for me to be genuine because I'm not going to be judged. And I think that it's not even really a skill, but I think like that kind of attitude can exist in any kind of form of counselling. I think it's just about. I think it boils down to just someone really being their self, their unapologetic self, and that you feeling that you can be yourself as well.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I find this whole it's almost like we grow up in a society, I guess, where it is more, a lot of the situations we grow up in is very much different to that, isn't it? In terms of the person that's taking care of us, you can have the nicest parents in the world, but generally they're the ones, especially at an early age, they need to tell you what to do. They need to control that. And then you go to school where you have a literal teacher who's telling you not just the subjects, but how to behave. I'm not criticizing these things. They're there for a reason, but you're sort of brought up in this way. And then obviously you go into a job, and the job, you have a boss who tells you what to do, and that they've been in it for years, and they're the expert, and you have to learn. So I guess maybe it's a difficult mindset to. I'm just sort of reflecting on myself. Maybe it doesn't come that naturally to get out of the whole teacher-student mindset, and try to actually, because I completely agree. Whenever I've actually stepped back and just let someone really say, I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast as well, was because I want to sort of teach myself to listen more and step back and use that in my personal life. But I feel, it's just a sort of thought that maybe it can be quite difficult to step into that mindset for the counsellor, to let the person figure it out for themselves. And there was in the youth work that I've done, we were given quite a lot of training, and continued training throughout the job. But one of the things that stuck out for me was creating a nurturing environment for
Okay.
for the young people, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to impose too much in this sort of thing of trying to be too imposing with what they need to do, and how they need to behave in a general sense, like being kind and all the other positive traits. Also, it's just creating a nurturing environment, an environment of kindness, an environment of proactivity, an environment of anything else, any other quality that you want to see fostered in the people you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It sounds like almost like if you provide if you provide that environment, if you provide that space for people to where they have the space to kind of almost to make their own choices and to make their decisions and to kind of realize their potential, that they will take it. And I guess it's an approach that I think growing up as kids, and I think there is to a certain extent we kind of need, because there's a lot that we don't know as kids, and we do need our parents' guidance and the guidance of teachers. But I think sometimes that's taken that might be taken a bit too far, where almost they don't trust that kids can learn to kind of find out answers for themselves and to find out solutions for themselves. I think it kind of creates a bit of a dependence on an authority figure to find out that solution.
And I guess where we place the credit as well, if a kid turns out really well from parenting or school or in a job, maybe the inclination for some people, or a lot of people I don't know, is to see, well, they had a strict regime with the parents. They were very they told them exactly what they needed to hear. The teachers were the same. The job was the same. But maybe we forget to look at the times when the child is working by themselves in school, or when they're in the playground and they're trying stuff out for themselves, and that time, naturally, is going to be more of the time than when an adult is telling them what to do or telling them. And I completely agree. The structure and the teaching on every stage of your life is essential. But maybe some people, I know that I'm included because I struggle with it, but placing the focus and some of the credit, or a lot more of the credit on, look at when whether it's a kid or an adult, look at how much they just figure out for themselves. And that time is just as, if not more precious than the teacher student type time. I
mean, I think it's all. I think it comes down to, like, a big part of person-centered. The person-centered approach is the subjective, phenomenological kind of viewpoint, where each person's subjective viewpoint is just as valid. So I think if there isn't enough of, if that person's own subjective view isn't validated as much, even as a kid, it's almost like it's like that person's individuality is maybe taken away a bit from them. Whereas if it's kind of fostered, where kind of, even as a kid, where they can still receive that guidance, but in a way that doesn't overshadow their individual ability and capability to reach their potential, then I think that's where certain problems might arise. Where, for example, maybe an authority figure instills, for example, a fear, for example, that maybe they had from their childhood, and they just passed it on to a kid, rather than allowing the kid to learn for themselves what they should be or shouldn't be afraid of. I know one example I think of is, as a kid, for example, I was taught that dogs are scary and that I should be afraid of dogs, without actually learning for myself. And I kind of grew up with a bit of an unhealthy, an unhealthy fear of dogs. And as I kind of grew older, I kind of realized that I never really learned for myself what it was like to interact with dogs. I never really interacted with them as kids because I was told to as a kid because I was told to stay away from them. So I think that kind of it's a basic example, but
you shouldn't watch the first Harry Potter film. There's a 3-headed dog in that one.
Yeah.
Or Cujo.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that yeah. I was told to stay away from those movies as well as real dogs.
Okay.
But yeah, that just kind of gives an example that that I wasn't really, I didn't really have a chance to explore for myself, and I didn't have a chance to develop my own subjective view on dogs because it was passed down from parents and grandparents and family who maybe had fears that had been passed down to them from their parents, So I think that just kind of goes to show that it's that person's own subjective viewpoint really has a lot of validity.
Yeah. Maybe your parents and grandparents watch Cujo and they're like, right,
yeah,
no more dogs.
We'll have a family viewing night during lockdown, like a horror movie night.
Right, so unfortunately, I think we're going to have to bring the show to an end. There's so much that we could carry on with, and there's so many more questions I have. But yeah, I don't know if you'd be happy to come on for another show, another episode one time.
Yeah, I think it would be. Thanks for having me. I'm honoured.
No, it's been amazing. We actually went in quite a few directions that I didn't expect. With the conversation, which was all very enlightening. But yeah, so thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. No, it's been great. And I just want to say to anyone listening, please feel free to continue this conversation. You can comment with any thoughts you have, or you can contact me if you want to come on the show yourself. Have a think about the stuff we've been talking about. We've been talking about counselling and giving people space and not imposing too much. We've been talking about coming from different cultures or feeling an affiliation with different cultures or bridging a divide, even if it's not a country or religious divide, just sort of seeing both sides, and also languages as well, and knowing different languages. So there's lots we've covered, and please have a think for yourselves. I guess we just ended this conversation about thinking for yourselves and letting someone think for themselves. But yeah, I'd be really interested to hear any listeners, their thoughts on what we've talked about. But yeah, thanks again, Omar. It's been brilliant.
No, thank you very much, Dan. Cheers. Appreciate it. Have a good week.
You too. There's something else I'd like to say to any listeners, all three of you. This podcast is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing experiment. I'm trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so any feedback on this or other episodes will be really appreciated. I don't want this podcast to just be for my own enjoyment. The goal is for it to benefit people in some way. And constructive feedback is the best way to know if this goal is being achieved. If I don't know something's rubbish, then I'll just keep producing rubbish. If I don't know something's good, then I'll just stop producing anything good. And also, if you think of anyone that you know that would be a good guest for me to chat to, then please let me know. I would love the opportunity to speak to a wide range of people about an even wider range of subjects. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you continue the conversation. Bye for now.